Привет! Today I was thinking, since there is not that much to do on the car, like it's working, should be 100% tuned at the tuner, but I don't have money for that right now, so we could do something, which I'm gonna use in the future, and that's to put on launch control, wire it up in the car. So I have my schematics. There is a few ways to wire up this. By the way, I'm using Max ECU. This one, they are Swedish. They are quite popular in, at least in Sweden and Norway, probably Finland and maybe Denmark as well. These ECUs are very simple to wire up. They are very simple in the menus and everything. So I'm pretty sure maybe all aftermarket ECUs, or most of them, at least the most popular one, are the same. Like all the wiring are marked very easily. It's like physically written on them, like this is injector 1, this is number 2, this is coil number 1, and so on. But you can also program, this is not a sponsorship, but it's very simple. So you can program like each, if you have one which is marked for coil number 4, you can program it to do something completely different if you want. If you have coil number 6, but you have a 4 or 5 cylinder, then you can use it for something else, like launch controller. And I have the Max ECU Street. It's the smallest one. It was actually the smallest one at the time when I bought it. Now they have made an even smaller one. When I say small, I mean like with the inputs and outputs. You could run this on V12 engine if you have waste spark and such. If I was going to buy this again, I would. At the time I didn't have that much money. Same situation as now, so that's why I bought this. If I was going to, I would like to have the one which is called Race, just to have more inputs and outputs. Anyway, I was thinking to have launch controller of this button here. This is bought, like this handbrake or e-brake or whatever you want to call it, is bought from Speeding. It's also a Swedish list website. I don't know if they make this, but they don't come with this button. This is something Eric, the guy who has this car, he was the first one to buy this one, so I bought one as well after some time, and he had these buttons laying around and they were like perfect size, so it was like, why not? I was thinking to have launch controller on this button. So what we need to do is wire up this to one of the wires. Should be some under here somewhere. Then we need to program it, like to tell the ECU what this signal should do with the car and when to do it and so on. This green one here, if I remember correct, those are the one just extra input, output. They're for the tachometer, speedometer, whatever you want. I'm gonna use these. Actually, I don't have that much inputs and outputs I can use. As I said, this one is kind of like the cheapest. It's called the Max ECU Street. I mean, it's very good. I don't need any more, like, to get the car running and such. It's like perfect. If you have up to 6 cylinder, you don't need more. Oh shit, that's already in use. I had already used that one, which is in the car. That goes to the tachometer. The rest, the wire which I'm not using currently, I've just put here in a coil. So it goes through the firewall up in this, yeah, whatever it's called. We call it something like, the translation would be like water box for some reason, like this part. And here we have a lot to use, but we only need one. So I'm gonna use the next green one, find the number and take it out, pull it back. So something which has been thinking about more and more recently is, you know, those people who have or maybe had like a very cool project car, and they had it, maybe worked on it for many years, and then after some time, maybe just after they finished or maybe before they finished, they just sell it. Then they buy something like more expensive car. I'm starting to realize more and more, kind of understand them, because in the past I always was thinking like, why would you sell your super cool something old usually? Is this the one? Should be 2 green here, but this is one of them, and then there is another one. One of them is already in use. It was hooked up to the boost controller, but at the tuner had some issues with this boost controller. They didn't want to spend too much time on trying to figure out the boost controller, so they put in a manual one. And this wire is still hooked up to the boost controller, but I probably won't use it now, maybe at a later point. So I need to find this other green one. That's the one I'm gonna need to pull back. Here it is. So yeah, sometimes I'm thinking like, I really understand those people who kind of just stop with this uphill battle. It's never gonna be, in my opinion, it's never gonna be as cool to have something you actually built yourself compared to bolt-on car if you only have bolt-on mods. I'm starting to understand this other perspective also more and more. And it would be different if I could drive this car on public road. If it was allowed for me to drive this car on public road. So here we have the output, or maybe actually the input to the ECU. And this needs to connect to one of these. And the other one of these needs to be connected to 12 volts, or is it ground? I believe it could be ground actually. If I remember correctly, it's ground. So when I press this button, the circuit would go all the way through, and then the ECU would know time to launch. It's also possible to have this launch control activate in other ways, not necessarily with a button. You can have previous setup. When I had VR6, I also had launch control. It was an NA VR6, so it was power was actually, I think it was 160 something at the wheels, which we can't try to calculate, and it's like, okay, that's the same as stock power in the engine when it came in the Mark III. Then it was hooked up, speed sensor hooked up to the ECU from the gearbox. So I had put in, if my car is driving slower than certain amount of speed, which was very slow, and I had more than certain amount of throttle, TPS signal was more than, let's say, 50-60%, then it would activate launch control, because I didn't have this button. If I remember correct, you can also in this ECU you need both these two things, and also to have the clutch all the way in, something, if you have a sensor on the clutch, or you can have several things which needs to be to activate this launch controller. Just realized something. I found an output from the ECU wire when I want to use it for as an input, and apparently maybe I was talking a bit too much about how great the Max ECU is, because outputs you can use for different stuff, a bunch, all of them, but that's output. But input, there are specific ones, and you can't use an output as an input, and vice versa. I need to find the input, and on this Max ECU Street I have 2 of them. I have not used any of them, so I will take. This is why I wanted another type of ECU, because then on the other bigger kind of ECUs, you have a bunch of more input. Not that I need it, but it would be nice, since I now have Mark II wishbones in front and rear. I have the ability to have ABS sensor. Not that I was gonna use it for ABS, but then I could wire it into the ECU, and it could, I don't know, probably do some cool stuff using the signal from the 4 different ABS sensors or something. I don't need it, but it's just cool. I have found it. I trace it back, do the same stuff. So now everything has been wired up. Unfortunately, I do not want to test this at the moment, because there is one thing I need to wire up. See, now the ground just here. I need to wire this in, make this go to ground, because it's amazing what information you get when you actually follow some instructions. So it says this is like the wiring for this ECU. This can be downloaded on the Max ECU website, and it says that digital input needs to be wired to ground. And I went into the launch control, activated it, so now when I have more than 40%, or maybe I should put a bit more, maybe 60% TPS. TPS is throttle position sensor, so when the throttle is more than whatever amount you want to set, like let's say 50, if you have more than 50% and push in the button, now the car will activate launch control. And then you can set at what RPM the launch control is supposed to set at, like should it be at 3000 RPM, 4 or 5000 RPM, you can be as specific as you want. You can do some, it's gonna pull ignition or fuel. I need to check what is the best there. And yeah, I will wire this ground in, put everything back in the harness in the engine bay, put it back as it was. So everything is wired in. Now I just need to wire in this ground. We're good to go. Drink more coffee, call it a day. So I really would like, I've never owned a rear-wheel drive car. I would like to have one. It's kind of like what I'm thinking about these days, and I've been doing it for a few months now, that I would love to have rear-wheel drive car that is street legal. That is like, that would be like a bolt-on car, a 90s JDM car. But I'm not gonna, I have a few in mind, but it's not the most common ones, or like a A80 Supra would be cool, but they're crazy expensive. Skyline GTR, they are also crazy expensive, and I don't think they are worth the money they are selling for. So we have this, there is a R32 GTST, and it's the first time I've seen the chassis. We have one in Bergen. I think it's one of two in Norway, and like that chassis, fuck, that looks good. Comes with a RB20, but Jesus, that's a cool chassis. Maybe not that, but something like this one day. It's wired in, everything is back. I want to put the dash on the car, and I need to, because this is cool and all, but I have the dash and it's not pretty, so it's here, and I don't really care that much, because I need to chop up the part in the middle where switches are. On this one I need to cut away some part to make it fit, and I think that will give the car a bit more. It's not so aggressive as it is now. Unfortunately, I'm sorry, I'm not gonna test it until like now as I'm packing up. I was thinking, like, I have this kind of dream to be able to have this road trip somewhere across Europe, and it would be cool to do it in a car which is fun to drive, but it would be cool anyway to do it in like a proper shit box of some kind, like a like a Charan or something. I mean, you got the, I really like the Charan actually also. Would be proper sleeper if you get it with the VR6 and put a turbo on it or something. That's it for today. Thank you for watching. Remember to support Ukraine, because I want to take a road trip there, support them, and then we can do a road trip to Ukraine with cars.